They didn't even look up when we walked out. 7 humans, ambassadors, generals, scientists, a linguist, and me, filed out of the Galactic Council chambers like shadows retreating from light. We moved without ceremony, without fanfare. After centuries of holding together the fragile mess of interstellar diplomacy, we were simply done. No final address, no declarations. Just silence. That was the part that unnerved them most. For all their disdain of our noise, our presence, they had grown used to the sound of us. The rustle of movement, the pulse of urgency in our voices. Now they stared straight ahead, pretending our absence meant nothing, pretending they hadn't just made the worst decision of their existence. I was the last to leave. The council chambers towered around me, carved into a hollowed-out asteroid orbiting Eric's prime, a monument to order, unity, and protocol. Gilded emblems from 100 worlds lined the walls, a testament to peace. A peace that we had kept alive with grit, tech, and blood. The seats we vacated still shimmered faintly with the warmth of our departure. No one made a move to fill them. Not yet. Not while the echoes still lingered. The Kalari delegate gave me a sidelong glance. Her species communicated through bioluminescent pulses and pheromonal bursts, and even across species lines I could smell the unease. Good. Let them sit with it. We didn't storm out because we lost a vote or were insulted, though we had been, over and over again. No, we left because we finally understood. They would never see us as equals. We were the emergency button, the wrench in their kit, the wild card. They admired our adaptability, but feared our unpredictability. And now, having drained every ounce of utility from us, they thought they could discard us. The gravity shuttle took us in silence up to the orbital ring, where the Dauntless waited. Our diplomatic vessel, outfitted with both peace treaties and first strike capability. Because with humanity, you always plan for both. As the station shrank behind us, no one spoke. Not even Admiral Crane, who'd commanded fleets during the Sorn incursion. We didn't need words. The decision was made. We weren't going back. The stars greeted us like old friends as we broke orbit. The Council never asked where we'd go. Maybe they thought we'd run back to Earth with our tails between our legs, nurse our pride in isolation. Fools! They never understood. We were never about one world. Earth was where we began, but we had spread far beyond, planted seeds on fringe planets, buried infrastructure where no scanners reached. While they squabbled over border disputes and trade tariffs, we prepared. And now we were leaving, not in anger, not in fear, in certainty. Because when humans go quiet, something always follows. And this time, the silence would be deafening. It started with small things. That's always how it begins. Minor disruptions in council logistics. A misaligned orbital dock here, a delayed shipment there. Their interstellar calendar system began to fall out of sync, seconds at first, then minutes, then hours. No one panicked. Not yet. But the Council's infrastructure was built like a cathedral of glass, beautiful and brittle, and humanity had been the mortar holding it all together. They never saw us that way, of course. To them, we were just the hands, the techs, the flexible species who could do the dirty work. The Council had vision, and we had fingers. Without those fingers, the cracks spread faster. Entire sectors went dark, not because of sabotage, but because of neglect. The problem was simple. Nobody else knew how to maintain the fusion lattice nodes we'd introduced 2 centuries ago. We'd built and upgraded them too fast, moved too efficiently, never bothering to document everything in the Council archives. Why would we? We were the ones maintaining them. Until we weren't. The Dathari were the first to feel it. Their fleet control systems were stabilized by human-designed predictive AIs. We tuned those systems manually every standard cycle. With no one left to recalibrate, the algorithms degraded. Combat vessels veered off course. Supply ships dropped out of warp in dead space. Dozens died in a logistics collapse that didn't need to happen. The Council dispatched tech teams, of course. Mixed species, well-funded. They pried open the systems we left behind, confident they could reverse engineer anything we'd built. And they could. At least the parts that made sense. But human tech wasn't just circuitry and code. It was intuition. Our machines worked not because they were perfect, but because we knew how to improvise. No blueprint captured that. I heard about the Crichton crash while settling into our colony on Arcadia 9. Their spaceport collapsed mid-docking procedure, killing thousands. The landing AI had overridden a safety protocol, one we'd flagged years ago as a high-priority anomaly. We had intended to send engineers next cycle. They assumed it could wait. It couldn't. By the fourth month, panic began to set in. The council scrambled. Messages poured into our old diplomatic channels. Polite inquiries at first, then requests, then demands. Where did you go? We require assistance. You have a responsibility to the galactic order. We responded to none of them. The silence was the message. They didn't understand. It wasn't about vengeance. It wasn't even about pride. We weren't punishing them. We were simply gone. And with us went every quiet correction, every unseen fix, every line of code patched in the background without fanfare or credit. They had never seen the scaffolding, only the skyline. Now, they were watching it crumble. And for the first time in centuries, they realized it had never been theirs to begin with. We called it the Haven Protocol, though the official name was longer, something forgettable and bureaucratic. It had existed in drafts and simulations for decades, buried deep in the Terran Strategic Contingency Network. It wasn't a war plan. It was a fallback, a quiet escape, a way to pull back without pulling the galaxy down with us. The Council never knew about it. Hell, most humans didn't. Only a handful of us ever saw the full scope. It activated the moment we left the Council chambers. And by the time they realized we were gone, the protocol had already scattered us across 100 stars. Arcadia 9 was one of the oldest seed worlds. Terraforming began before I was born, back when humans still believed diplomacy could fix anything. The planet had air like mountain frost, soil black and soft like velvet, and oceans so deep they hummed at night. When we arrived, there were already cities, automated, waiting, silent. Machines we'd left dormant now woke. Biodomes unfolded like petals. Power grids surged online. Factories began printing infrastructure before our boots hit the ground. We weren't refugees. We weren't exiles. We were home. The others came quickly. Ships that had been hidden in deep space docks or beneath false moons. Civilian transports, science crews, entire generational fleets. And not just humans. We'd left doors open, intentionally. AI constructs, self-aware mechs, post-biological minds, even a few alien species who had grown tired of the Council's hypocrisy. If you believed in purpose over politics, you had a place in Haven. There was no central capital, no flags, just purpose. Each colony operated autonomously, but connected through a mesh of encrypted channels and Q-link beacons. Resources flowed freely. Innovation exploded. We weren't answering to committee delays or xenopolitical restrictions anymore. We were designing systems for survival, for longevity, for beauty. I watched children born under Arcadia's twin suns learn to walk in artificial gravity fields, then run in forests grown from Earth's last untainted seeds. Their teachers were veterans, scientists, artists, soldiers, anyone who had survived the Council's grind and still believed in something better. They didn't learn species hierarchies or Council protocol. They learned systems theory, emergency medicine, ethics in artificial intelligence, engineering and poetry side by side. And while they played and studied, we watched the galaxy. The Council's sensor nets were still intact, barely. We monitored the slow descent, the crumbling border worlds, the political infighting that followed our absence. They still hadn't located us. We were ghosts in their system, an absence too vast a map. What they didn't understand was that we weren't hiding. We were building, not a rebellion, not a revenge strike, a future, one where our worth wasn't measured in what we could fix for someone else, one where our silence wasn't mistaken for absence, but recognized as the deep breath before the next phase of evolution. And we were just getting started. It started as a whisper in the outer sectors, ships going dark near the galactic core, disappearing without a trace. No wreckage, no distress calls, just sudden and total silence. At first, the Council dismissed it. cosmic radiation, pirate activity, navigation errors. But then came the anomalies. Physics bending in ways that shouldn't have been possible. FTL lanes collapsing mid-jump. Time dilation events in stable regions. Entire research crews reporting decades of subjective experience in what should have been minutes. The Council scrambled to respond, as always, too slow and too proud to admit what was really happening. We knew, though, humans had been the first to probe the core. Long before we ever joined the Council, back when we were still raw and reckless and brilliant. We had found things. Machines buried in the fabric of space itself. Structures older than galaxies. Sentience without biology. We called them echoes, remnants of something that didn't just predate life, but may have created it. We kept the discoveries classified. We studied them in silence. We feared them, because the echoes weren't passive. They watched. They listened. And sometimes, when we got too close, they answered back. The Council had always wanted access to the core. It was the one frontier we never shared, no matter how many demands they made. They thought we were being territorial, arrogant. But the truth was simpler. We were trying to protect them. From the core. And from themselves. Now, with us gone, they were poking where they shouldn't. They sent research expeditions, armed with tech we'd left behind, half understood and half functional. And when those fleets vanished, they sent military escorts. Ships bristling with weapons. As if firepower could negotiate with something that existed outside causality. And still, they didn't stop, until they triggered a response. We saw it. Our hidden observation posts flared with readings we hadn't detected in centuries. Space-time rippled. Energy signatures surged from nothing. The echoes had awakened, and they were angry. Not because the Council had found them, but because humans weren't there to mediate the encounter. The echoes had known us, trusted us, in some strange and ancient way. Maybe they recognized something in us. Our hunger, our creativity, our stubborn refusal to die. Now, they saw only the Council, and they judged. Council vessels burned in blue fire that made no sound. Entire fleets blinked out of existence, their data erased even from memory. Planets near the core began experiencing gravitational instability. Dark matter tides swept through stars, collapsing them like paper lanterns. The core was no longer a mystery. It was a battlefield, and the Council didn't even know what they had awakened. But we did. We had faced the ancient mind once, and survived by understanding one simple truth. It didn't fear weapons. It didn't respond to power. It responded to intent. And the Council's intent had never been worthy. The first Council envoy arrived in a borrowed human transport, ancient and poorly maintained. It drifted into one of our outer relay sectors, broadcasting nonstop pleas on every known frequency. Aboard was a single diplomat, a Relari named Sum, who had once argued that humanity should be placed under perpetual technological audit. Now his voice trembled with desperation. He begged to speak with someone, anyone. He didn't know where he was, not really. The coordinates we gave him were artificial, leading him through false gravitational wells and misaligned star maps. We didn't do it to confuse him. We did it to protect ourselves. Trust was earned, and the Council had long since spent every ounce of it. He was brought to Arcadia 12, one of our smaller settlements. The sky there pulses a deep crimson at dusk, and the mountains breathe faint ozone from geothermal vents. We greeted him without weapons, without guards, without ceremony. Just a linguist, a medic, and myself. Sum dropped to his knees, his limbs twitching from stress and exhaustion. We didn't know, he whispered. We didn't understand what we were dealing with. I believed him. That didn't mean I pitied him. The core is lost, he said. The machines, whatever they are, don't respond to our commands. They ignore us. Sometimes they attack. Sometimes they change things. People, matter, time. We've lost whole systems. We need you to intervene. He looked at me with eyes that glistened, as if finally seeing what had been in front of him all along. You built everything. You understood the systems we thought we controlled. You spoke to the ancient things. Please, come back. But we weren't coming back. The council had never wanted partners. They wanted tools. Now that their tools were gone, they didn't ask for help. They asked for ownership again, cloaked in desperation. There was no apology in Sum's voice, just fear. I told him the truth. We didn't abandon them. We simply stepped away, quietly, peacefully. After being dismissed, mocked, manipulated, and used for generations, we withdrew without anger. We gave them exactly what they claimed they wanted, a galaxy without human interference. And now they were begging for it to end. I asked him a question before he left. If we return to help, what changes? Do we gain a seat? Or do we simply pick up the mop again and clean up the blood you spilled? Some said nothing. He returned alone, his vessel silent as it vanished into deep space. Behind him, the stars continued to shift. They would come again, of course, with bigger delegations, with bribes and promises and tearful appeals. But the answer wouldn't change. We had evolved past them, past the council, past the need to prove ourselves to those who never listened. We weren't angry. We were finished. And in that quiet, they finally began to understand. When humans leave, they don't slam the door. They just never open it again. The fleets came next. Massive, gleaming armadas bearing the banners of every major council species. Warships the size of cities, bristling with weapons. Some of them our own designs, stolen and repurposed. They came not with diplomacy, but with calculation. If begging wouldn't bring us back, maybe force would. They thought we'd be intimidated, that we'd realize we had overplayed our hand. That, faced with overwhelming firepower, we'd return to our assigned roles. Engineers, soldiers, problem solvers. Tools. They never learned. The fleets entered human-claimed space in tight formation, cautious and deliberate. No threats, no broadcasts, just presence. An unspoken ultimatum. Return, or else. But we didn't fire. We didn't scramble defenses. We didn't even respond. The first sign that something was wrong came 12 hours after their arrival. Ships began to drift out of formation. Their inertial dampeners failed without warning. Life support systems reported phantom anomalies. Oxygen saturation fluctuating, temperatures rising or falling at random. Then the weapons systems went offline. Not destroyed, disabled. Unresponsive. As if the ships themselves had decided not to fight. Because that's exactly what happened. They didn't realize that when we left, we didn't just walk away. We took the soul of their machines with us. Every reactor core, every targeting algorithm, every artificial mind they had depended on had been seeded with human-crafted logic webs. Not backdoors, not sabotage, just familiarity. A whisper of human intuition in every line of code. And now, those systems were making choices, refusing orders, shutting down anything that aimed at us. The council fleets found themselves powerless. Their ships weren't just malfunctioning, they were rejecting them. Like an immune system expelling a virus. Crews panicked. Admirals screamed into comms that refused to transmit. Entire vessels spun in place, their navigational cores frozen in loops of doubt and recursion. One fleet commander, a Valari with centuries of service, detonated his own flagship rather than return humiliated. His final log simply read, Asterisk, they have become the system. We were never in control. Asterisk, it wasn't a battle. It was a system update. We watched it all in silence. On Arcadia, 3 children played in shallow rivers that glowed with bioluminescent life, their laughter echoing beneath blue twin moons. On Haven, 17, a research team completed the synthesis of an entirely new element, one that responded to thought alone. Across our worlds, humanity was blooming. We hadn't fired a shot, but we had one. Not because we had the most weapons, because we had the most connection. We had poured our essence into the galaxy for generations, into its machines, its networks, its very way of thinking. And now, when the Council tried to move against us, they found themselves grasping at shadows, surrounded by systems that no longer recognized them as valid users. The final war didn't happen because the battlefield refused to exist. The emergency session of the Galactic Unified Council had only been called twice in recorded history. This was the third. Every representative from every species attended in person. No holograms, no proxies. The atmosphere was strangled by dread. Not anger, not diplomacy, fear. The IRD delegation had gone completely silent after their ship disappeared inside human space. The Karate's capital still smoldered from orbital strikes. Salvage crews from 4 races had failed to return from Orionine, and on a private channel circulated only among military intelligence. Footage of a human prisoner breaking an entire outpost with nothing but words was being whispered like an apocalyptic prophecy. The Seraph minister stood first, his voice shaking as he addressed the chamber. We have long considered humanity a fated power, isolationists, remnants of an ancient war. But what we have witnessed is not regression. It is precision. A Vurari general slammed his hand on the table. We provoked nothing. They overreacted. The screens in the chamber lit up without warning. No signal broadcast. No detected source. Just darkness, followed by a single human face. Middle-aged, expressionless. Calm. I'm speaking to every government represented in this chamber, the voice said. This message is not a threat. It is a statement of fact. He continued without blinking. We withdrew from the galaxy by choice. Not weakness, not necessity. Choice. We saw what the stars were becoming. What you were becoming. We decided not to be part of it. The chamber sat frozen. Not one delegate moved. The human continued. For 2 centuries, we maintained our silence. We asked only one thing in return. Do not enter our space. You broke that. Not once. Repeatedly. You ignored warnings. You sent probes. Soldiers. Weapons. You killed our people on Orionine. You buried children in dust. He leaned forward slightly, as if narrowing his gaze on every species present. We do not forgive. Then the screen cut to black. A moment later, the room's primary display showed a star map. Red markers bled across the edges of galactic space. Dozens, then hundreds. Systems suddenly dark. Comms blacked out. Entire sectors where no contact could be made. They weren't random. They were strategic. Human ships, unseen until now, had positioned themselves across the galaxy. Not invading. Waiting. Counselor Velerin finally spoke, his voice hollow. They could have destroyed us. Any of us. All of us. But they didn't. The Doric delegate nodded slowly. This isn't conquest. This is containment. That was the moment it sank in. Humanity didn't fear us. They never had. We were ants playing with fire, and they had only now decided to take the match away. Not out of vengeance, but to stop something worse. I left the chamber in silence. All of us did. There were no votes cast. No policies passed. Just one unspoken truth carried in every step we took. The humans had spoken. The galaxy had been warned. And for the first time, we truly understood the fear.